You know, I've never told anybody my story. My dad was a monster, and I saw God transform him. And so I wrote this song for my dad.
Welcome to Contagious Influencers, home of the CIA, the Contagious Influencers of America, where you get the inside scoop on the story behind those making a difference and changing the world as we know it. Here's your host, David Sams, a.k.a. Dashiki Dave.
Hey, thanks, Tim. You know, folks, you cannot imagine how excited I am to have these two people sitting right here in the studio with me today, Bart Millard and Amy Grant. Here's the deal. Bart is the guy that wrote and is the lead singer of this song. He's the guy that is the lead singer of MercyMe, and the song is I Can Only Imagine, probably the most iconic song in Christian music history, at least contemporary Christian music history, as well as pop history. It's been a mega hit in country music. Several people recorded it. So Bart's here because this week, the movie I Can Only Imagine hits the big screen, and it's going to be all over the country, coast to coast, and I've seen it twice. It is absolutely remarkable. But with Bart is someone who plays into the story, Miss Amy Grant, one of my all-time favorite artists. So we're going to have them here in just a second. But first, I have to tell you, the guy that absolutely just knocks one out of the park in this movie is the guy that plays Bart's abusive father, and that's Dennis Quaid. He is remarkable in this film, and but ironically, he had never heard the song I Can Only Imagine before, and he committed to this script because he loved the script, he loved the character before he even listened to the song, believe it or not. So I met up with him yesterday, and I asked him, Dennis, how in the world had you not heard of I Can Only Imagine?
I don't know what hole I was in, but I was not familiar with the song. And so when I got the script, I got a script and a CD, and I just took the CD and put it over here because I'm doing the script. And it was the first and only time that I'm going to be an audience member and, with this story and have a first-time experience of it. And that's why I did the movie, because it just so profoundly hit me in the heart.
Well, I can't believe you had not heard the song before, but how did it impact you once you did hear it?
It's such a beautiful song, and it grows on you. I take it personally. You hear the song, and that's what makes it such why it was the most successful song in ever, faith song, Christian song, and why it's crossed over into the pop arena as well, was because everybody who listens to it puts it into their own personal life. It's about them, and that's how it grows on you.
And to prove Dennis's point, some time ago, we put a shout out to listeners of our Keep the Faith radio show, which is now heard on some 300 stations across the country. We asked listeners to call in and tell us what this iconic song has meant to them. The response we got was off the charts. We also have asked a few artists along the way and authors who have been in our studio what the song has meant to them. Check this out.
I Can Only Imagine is that song has just meant so much to millions, literally millions of people. And it's predominantly a story about a relationship with a father and a son.
Our 21-month-old granddaughter went home instantly to be with Jesus in a car accident. If it hadn't been for that song, I don't know that I could have made it.
I can only imagine.
My wife was 90 pounds and barely a shadow of herself, and planted seeds for a garden that she would never see.
What it will be like.
That's so inspiring. Who knows how much time I have left.
When I walk
But I have a glimpse at no matter what happens,
by your side,
it can be great.
I can only imagine
And I know God
what my eyes will see
smiles on my dad.
when your face
I just love all the memories I have.
is before.
I'm kind of jealous that my son
can only imagine.
got to see it sooner than I did. It makes me happy. And again, it brings me that peace.
Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Or will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
I could not sit there and watch my mom struggle as much as she was. The Lord told me, play this song, and it finally hit me that I can only imagine on my phone. And I played that for my mom, and she got so peaceful. And about 15 minutes later, she had passed.
It gave me so much peace to know that she was seeing things that my eyes would not see until I got to heaven. And I could only imagine what it would be like to join her.
My 2.5-year-old son, Elijah, after an absolute miraculous healing, turned the stereo on and he just stopped and he sang every word to that song that I had no idea he even knew.
Gosh, why do I not think about heaven more? I'm looking forward to seeing my grandmother. When she passed and went to heaven, I cried for weeks. But I know the end of the story, and that's the greatest news of all.
I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I will do is forever worship you. I can only imagine.
I went home and got to make an amends to my dad.
I can only imagine.
And he passed away last Friday, but he got to see me clean.
Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Or will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
Crying out as I was holding my baby's blanket, saying, God, why us? The small, still voice said, I lost my son too, and we'll get through this.
And I can only imagine when all I would do is forever.
Everybody understands hurt and loss.
Forever worship you.
Whether you're a passionate pursuer of Christ or you've never darkened the door of a church, everybody just has to believe there's something better out there than what we're living right now.
I can only imagine.
When my mother died, she had a bed of yellow roses on her casket. And so when I went to see her, I took a card to her gravesite that said, a mother's love never died. And on it was a yellow butterfly. all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this yellow butterfly appeared. So that was nothing but the power of God showing me that he was there, telling me everything was going to be okay.
When it comes to grief, we don't want you to grieve like those who have no hope. And the great promise that we have as Christians is that every goodbye is a see you later.
Wow. That really sends a chill down my spine. Thanks, team, for putting that together, especially Penny at our flagship station, WFSH in Atlanta, where she hosts Keep the Faith with Penny. Bart, I have to ask you, how in the world did you come up with that song?
Well, the song came about in the movie. It's all kind of compressed to where it seems like it all happens in about a couple of years or a year or so. But in real life, my father was diagnosed with cancer when I was a freshman in high school. He passed away when I was a freshman in college. And when we were leaving the gravesite, my grandmother said, "I can only imagine what Bub's seeing now." And as a 19-year-old, I got like completely obsessed with that phrase. And so like if I had a pen in my hand, I would doodle "I can only imagine" down on anything I get my hands on. If I'm on hold on a phone, back when phones were connected to a wall and had a cord, you couldn't go anywhere. It's like I would just write it on everything. Get in trouble for it even because it'd be on. There's pieces of furniture with "Imagine" written on it.
Oh wow!
At 19, it was way easier for me to become obsessed with heaven and where he was now than seeing an empty bedroom. And so I guess it's probably in real life about 6 or 7 years later when we actually wrote the song. He passed away in 91. I started the band in 94. No, it's been like 8 or 9 years. When we were, as an independent band, we needed one more song left for an album. And I was on the bus one night, and I was literally trying to find a blank page to start writing on. And every page on these 3 journals that I carried with me everywhere had "Imagine" written on it somehow, in some way, like every page.
Destiny, man.
And it was aggravating because I always had to have a clean page to write. And then at some point I was like, oh, okay, I totally get it. And realize it's, even though it was written in about 5 or 10 minutes, it had been in my heart for years.
Amy, how'd you get mixed up in all this?
A woman sat next to my friend and manager, Jennifer Cook, on an airplane, and they stayed in touch. They just hit it off. They were both working moms. And this woman's child, her daughter, came back from a youth camp. And I think your band was the band at the youth camp. And she came and said, "You have got to hear this song." And I might have gotten it one other way. I mean, I think maybe 2 people sent it to me. And the other would have been a pastor from a Baptist church that was involved with youth camps.
Well, I know that when we got to come meet you, when you and Brown were working on the song, which is like an epic thing, I remember your manager was telling me, all I remember is where it kind of picked up for me was she was like, Amy's not weird about it, but just when Amy's picking songs, you just never know what headspace she's in. Or like if you're writing or just, and that was it also, especially with a song you haven't written. She goes, "I'm not one just to hand a complete song over to Amy. You should do this." And so she said she queued it up in your car and set it to write the CD right where you'd start the car and it would play.
Yeah.
And then she said that you called in tears, goes, "What is happening in my car? I listened to it like 20 times. What is this song?"
Yeah.
And so she kind of was like, I so wanted to hear it, but I didn't want to push it on, like say, like it was just,
yeah,
just planned out, even though it was kind of planned out.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's the best way to hear a song is just to have it sort of invade your space and not be like, thumbs up or thumbs down. I mean,
yeah, totally.
When I heard that song, my life was sort of it had been in upheaval. And sort of life as I knew it before, I was going through a divorce. And I remember a line in the movie that you guys were worried about, "I hope this doesn't offend you. We're looking for a comeback song." And I went, "Are you kidding?" My life was so in the dumps that I mean, that song found me at a time where it was healing.
Oh, that's cool.
After that point, when Imagine took off for us, I'll never forget this too. We were about to do our first headlining tour, which is going to be the I Can Only Imagine tour. And then your manager, Jen, or your manager called and said, "Hey, this is the message we got. Amy, I think, wants to go on tour with you guys." okay, great. Well, we'll put this on the back burner.
The headlining
Yeah,
part.
we're going to change it all, and we're going to open for Amy. This is amazing. And then Amy's manager's like, no. She wants you guys she wants to be on your tour. Like, she wants to, like, you guys will still headline. And so then now all of a sudden Amy's going to be our sort of opening act. And we're like, whoa, what is happening? And I remember talking to you, and you're just like, and it was kind of that season to where there was such a transition, which is part of the reason why the album process slowed down for you. Yep. And she was just like, I'm just kind of tired, and I just love being around you guys, and I would love to be on the road with I would love to be around this. And so we were freaking out. Our first headlining tour, Amy Grant played before us. But the thing I'll never forget was that during that time, and it's amazing how I hope and pray that times have changed, that we would get some backlash. There would be churches that wouldn't want to put the show on.
Because I was involved.
Yeah, because you and Vince got married, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember Amy wanted to back out of the tour because she was afraid it was going to hurt us. Like, this is not well, I'm going to back out. And so we met at Houston's. And I don't know if you remember this, but we met at Houston's and had lunch. And I told Amy, I was like, there's no way in a million years that we're letting you leave this tour. I don't care if 4 people show up. Like, this is what you've done for us. It's like, that would be the worst thing ever if we bailed because of what's happening. I said, they're idiots. It's a joke. If that's what heaven's full of, I'd choose not to go, is what my attitude was. And it was like, and we were so angry about it. And so we stuck it through, and it was one of my favorite tours we were part of. But yeah, it's just amazing that even though it's because of the song originally, just how many times that our lives have kind of crossed, and to where it's like, it's not just a publicity thing to say that you're one of my dear friends. You really are one of my dear friends. And I'm proud of that.
What's it like to see your life on the big screen? Is it something you look at and go, why me, God? Or is it more like, of course it is?
Yeah, I've been waiting. Yeah, finally. No, the whole thing is very odd. And when I first read the script, I was an emotional wreck. I said, I can't do this. And then you read it a couple more times. You're like, okay, you start to desensitize to it. Then you go to see them film on the set for the first time. And I remember I flew to Oklahoma, and the first time I got there, I literally walked in. They set me down in a chair, said action, and it was when my dad's told he has cancer. And I didn't even get a chance to meet Dennis until after the scene. And so he walks in with Millard on this work shirt, and they're calling him Arthur or whatever, and you have cancer. And even though it's just acting, man, I was not, it was like being hit in the head with a hammer. Like, I was not ready for it. And then they went from that straight to the scene where he hits the plate over my head, and we get in this big fight, which is one of the things that actually happened in my life. And you just you can't prepare for it. And it's like, and I'm sitting there trying to keep myself together so that I don't ruin the scene by like crying out loud or whatever. It's very surreal. And one of the coolest scenes for me, it's also very therapeutic, was in that scene where they break the plate over my dad's head. There's literally, what's that?
Over your head.
Yeah, over my head, sorry. There's literally 100 people in the room hiding around every corner of the house. When they say cut, they just run like ants and reset the scene. So I'm kind of around the corner in that scene watching on a monitor. And so, you're going to hit him over the head. You're going to about to fight, and then Bart's going to storm out of the room. We're going to end the scene. Well, when that happens, they keep the camera rolling on Dennis. And so my dad is in the room after Bart's left, and he starts like just kind of getting emotional. He starts picking up the pieces, and he stops, and he's just trying to get a hold of himself. And I'm sitting there watching, and for the first time in my life, I'm thinking what my dad could have possibly gone through after I left. It's never crossed my mind, ever. Just to see him possibly broken, possibly like he can't control it, and he's so angry at himself. And man, it literally took my breath away. And I remember sitting there, and when they said cut, it's like people are scrambling like in slow motion, and I can't move. And Dennis would always look at me, and he was done. He'd run over, "Are you okay? Is everything good?" And I was like, man, I said, this is the weirdest thing that's ever going to come out of my mouth. But thank you, Dennis Quaid, for like helping me work something out with my dad. It's just odd. But
what therapy though?
Yeah.
What therapy? When you said, when Dennis showed you, you hear all the time phrases, love heals, love heals. Mm. But it's the compassion that it takes to put yourself as best you can in another person's shoes, and to see it from that angle. I mean, that's, and just the process of the movie forced you to do that in ways that you never would have.
Yeah, and the way Dennis respected the part so much, like he was, I mean, yeah, I didn't know what to expect, but he was so sensitive about like, he goes, I know your dad's not here, but I want this to be something you and your dad are proud of. And it also hit home with him. He has, I don't know what his past is, but he just kept kind of, you know, there's something similar about. And to the point to where, you know, Dennis, normally they do their thing, and when they're done filming, they go to the next movie. You might see him when it's time to do the press junket, stuff like that. Well, like we text, I would say at least once every 2 weeks, he'll still text. He loves music, and he's just like, he's all in this thing. And I don't know what it's done to him, but he's like, man, your dad rattled me, and he kills it. He does such an amazing job in this movie. Yeah, he really does.
So Bart, tell me more about your family and their reaction to the film, especially your mom.
There were a lot of things that I realized that I need to address with my mom and my brother before they see something like this on the big screen or just see the movie, you know, because nobody knew my dad was abusive. My brother never knew exactly how much or that he was until we were both adults. And so there were things that would happen. Like my mom's a great example of like, you know, in the movie, she leaves. Like in real life, they divorced when I was 3. My mom remarried when I was in 3rd grade, and my stepfather was transferred to San Antonio, so they moved. And in the movie, it's all compressed to where it's like she's there, sends me to camp, come home, there's a moving van, she's gone. Well, and also you understand, they're interviewing me like, what did you feel like when you were a 3rd grader? And so I'm telling them I felt abandoned. So the first script was like, man, like leaving me like Moses on the river and she's gone. I was like, oh, and my mom's very much a huge part of my life now. I thought this is going to kill her. And so there were 2 problems I had to get over. One was I found myself trying to put her in the story more than she really was to protect her. And my wife's the one that called me out, and she goes, your mother wasn't there. As bad as you want her to be there. Like I would find one, well, maybe you could put that she was, and Shannon's like, that's just as bad as the first thing. And so I was trying just so much wanting her to be a part that I started like, it would have been a fiction if it was up to me. Well, then the other thing was that just I realized, you know, I went and took the movie and sat down with my mom and said, hey, you know, this is how I saw it. And I was so ready for her to hate it and all stuff. And she just sat in tears and goes, yeah, that, you know, that like my dad, like, yeah, that's how he was. And the reason it felt so abandoned is what happened was my mom was going to move. She had to move her stuff out of her house, but they decided the night before that she said her goodbyes to me and put me to bed. And then they left. And then the moving vans came and got her stuff the next day. But we had already said goodbye, but as a 3rd grader, how much do I comprehend that? All I know is I go to school, come back, moving vans are taking her stuff. And in her mind, she's already said, bye, I love you, I'll see you in a few weeks. And I just remember, like, where is she? Why is she not here? And crying and chasing the moving vans, saying, I'm sorry, what did I do? Because I was a mama's boy. They decided to leave me and my brother together in a small town. And, you know, and just, they thought the move would be too much or let her figure it out. And she had been in a marriage before that was abusive and lasted for about 6-7 weeks. And so the whole family was like, you know what? Why don't you move, figure it out, and then he can come live with you then? Because people thought maybe it'll be another 6-week marriage or whatever. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff that had to be worked out in making the movie to where I was like, it would have been a nightmare if I didn't address that stuff. And then she just goes on the big screen and watching it with everybody else, so proud. And they're like, where'd you go? You know, oh my gosh. So she's as prepared as she can be for it.
So Bart, you know, yesterday I had a chance to meet up with Dennis Quaid, and who plays your father in the film. And man, does he ever play an amazing role of an abusive, just horribly abusive man. And I asked him how difficult that was to play that role.
Abusers are usually people who have been abused themselves in life, you know, by family members or by events. Who knows what happens? And that's not an excuse for abuse. And he was also a man of broken dreams himself, which is still not an excuse for abuse. But Arthur, my character, he got cancer, and it was the death sentence kind of cancer. And he had a short time to really look at his life, because that's what death's door does to you.
So Bart, man, you put up with so much. Were you able to forgive your dad? I mean, what did that take?
Oh man, the process of forgiving my dad, it certainly wasn't a one-time event. Like sometimes we treat salvation in a sense, is that, I'm saved, now I'm good, no problems or whatever. But it was, you got to understand, like my dad from probably about third grade up until, I don't know, 7th, 8th, maybe 9th grade when I went through the growth spurt, I don't remember many weeks where I wasn't beaten 3 or 4 times a week. If my dad was embarrassed in public, he would come home and take it out on me. And it was always behind closed doors. Nobody really knew much about it except maybe my grandmother. She had an idea, his mom. And so when he was diagnosed with cancer and this kind of transformation started taking place, man, I did not want grace to be for him. Like I didn't trust him. I was like a wounded pet, so to speak. And there was no way, like if anyone had the right to, to think it's not sincere, it would have been me. And if you had asked me if there's anybody that there's no chance of changing or whatever, I would say 100 times out of 100, it's my dad. He's the worst human I've ever known. And so the problem was that like the transformation was over, and this was over freshman, so over 4 or 5 period. It was just undeniable. Like, I mean, and it wasn't like he didn't like go to seminary and start preaching on the street corner. It was nothing. It was the things where people, what he was doing behind closed doors was so awful to me. But that's where the change was taking place. Like it wasn't just so people could see it and he's putting on a show. Like he was changing in the privacy of his own home. Like I would hear him praying for me and my brother and my mom, who he divorced when I was 3, through the walls, and like, what is he doing? Didn't know we had any Bibles in the house, and he'd fall asleep with his face in the Word every night. And it took time, but I think honestly there are parts of that relationship that I'm still forgiving today. Like as I process and figure it out. And so it's definitely a journey, but there was definitely a moment to where he, like I trusted him enough to where he literally became my best friend in the whole world. By the time he passed away, he was the godliest man that I'd ever known. And not because he was dynamic and a great speaker or a great singer. It's because when he had the chance to be anything but amazing in the privacy of his own home where no one could see, he was Jesus to me. And I'd never seen anything like it and have rarely seen it since, to be honest with you. It was heartbreaking when he passed away. And not just because it was like, for the first time in my life, I like with every fiber of my body did not want him to leave. When I spent my whole life trying to get away from him.
Bart, I loved what you said to me about, it was right before we turned the microphones on, that each one of us is loved for who we are. And
yeah, we're an expression of the divine. And this is just in church Sunday. They were talking. They said, "Man, you just have to remember first and foremost, your identity. You are a child of the God, and what you are, a child of the King, and what you are is you're an expression of the divine. Your life, your story is an expression of the divine. And regardless of your perception of who you are, or whatever, you're telling a story, good or bad. You're an expression of the Creator." And he goes, and you'll be the only one to tell this story in your life. Like, like we talk about how when Paul gets to heaven, it's going to be so amazing. Well, when the guy working at Walmart or Amy Grant or whoever, when they get there, that is the only story of its kind ever in the history of mankind. And it was just really like, wow, it's kind of a little bit of a wake up call. And it wasn't like, what are you doing with it? Work harder. It was nothing like that. It was just like, man, this is not a try harder, because that's the problem, is that we try too hard, that we think that it becomes like a thing we're trying to earn. But it's more of understanding that who we are in Christ. It's knowing that there's nothing we can possibly do to make Christ love us any more than he already does right now, which should be the greatest news of all, that on your worst possible day, when you make every wrong possible decision and you think you're train wrecking the whole thing, that there's a God that is still pleased with you. Not only is he pleased with you, that you are still holy and you're still righteous, you're still redeemed. And nothing that you ever do with your hands or any works that you do is going to change that. It may affect the quality of your life, but it's not changing how Christ sees you. And once we get that through our thick skull, everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything, it allows us to not only be more forgiving of ourselves, but other people. I always say, man, I don't buy my wife flowers to remind myself to love her. I do it because she's seen me at my absolute worst, and for whatever crazy reason, she still loves me.
That's good.
That's just like a microcosm of what the gospel is just understanding that, man, when you understand you're not going to make it better or worse between you and Christ, it is what it is.
That's good.
Say that again. I don't buy my wife flowers.
I don't buy my wife flowers to remind myself to love her. Like, oh shoot, I got to do this. I do it because she's seen me my absolute worst, and she still loves me.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's like there's a gratefulness that, and it's not. I'm not having to remind myself. It's like breathing. It just happens. My wife has seen the ugliest parts of me, and for whatever reason, thinks that I'm something that boggles my mind daily. It's like I'm sitting, I'm like, you sure it's not my voice? She's like, gross, no. And it's like, it's just, she has so many reasons to think that I'm hideous, and she doesn't. And it blows my mind. And I think that's just another way that God's like, you need a physical image of what I am to you. I think that's why marriage exists. I think it's like, you see these parts, it's like, oh my gosh, is this possible? Because, trust is a big issue for me with my dad and the way I grew up. And I think the biggest problem is we spend so much time trying to please God that we've forgotten how to trust him.
I can only imagine, yeah.
I had problems with my mom. She kicked me out at the age of 16. We didn't speak for about 4 years, and it really bothered me. And one day at church, we were forgiving everyone that ever led us in the wrong way. And so I went to the front, and I did that for my mom. And within 40 minutes, she texted me this huge, long text saying that she was sorry, that she loves me, that she wanted to be in my life.
Now, Bart, I Can Only Imagine has had a profound impact on millions and millions of people all over the world. And we asked people to call us and tell us what they thought of the song and to give us their story about how your song has impacted their lives. And you cannot imagine, we got hundreds of phone calls from folks. They just couldn't wait to share their story. What do you think about the song's enduring impact?
Well, it's. I mean, if you would have told me that, almost 20 years after writing the song that there'd be a movie or we'd be just sitting here talking about it, I think you're crazy. And it's like we knew it was special when we wrote it, but had no idea the impact it was going to have. I think one of the coolest, the coolest, I don't know, compliments or kind of what sums it up for me was we had a chance to go to Apple headquarters and show the movie a couple months ago, and they did a Q&A afterwards, and this big programmer guy, whatever, got up, and all he said was, "Hey, I just want to thank you and tell you that you telling your story now is absolute perfect timing." And so I thought I knew where he was going, like, okay, great, you're going through something. And he goes, "Well, let me explain." He said, "You've waited almost 18 years for us to know where the song came from." He goes, "That allowed this song to be the soundtrack to my life. Because if I had heard your story in the beginning, it would have been attached forever." And he goes, and so all of a sudden, I knew nothing about the song. And he goes, and it got me through me losing my mom or whatever. And he goes, and so now I'm at a place. And he was saying not for everybody as a whole, but for him, it was perfect time. He goes, now I'm at a place where I'm ready to hear where the song came from. He goes, but I needed those 18 years for it to be my song. And I was like, oh, gosh, it was unbelievable. Because I'd never heard it put that way. And I was like, yeah, you're welcome. That's amazing. But it's just an amazing perspective of sometimes you wish you could say you did on purpose, but to kind of, I just never thought to tell a story maybe between songs or whatever. But I think in that people have kind of taken ownership of it, and it's for a long time. And it's, yeah, man, you do this. Your hope is that you could create something that lasts way long after you're gone. And I think as a songwriter, that's something you want to be a part of. And yeah, it doesn't get old. I mean, it's we're grateful and overwhelmed and can't explain it, but it's I can't believe we're talking about I Can Only Imagine still.
Like Bart said, to have experienced the nearly 2-decade arc of this, the whole world knowing this song, and now going, that's the story behind it. Now we see that, but really that's just, to me, a sneak peek of all of our lives, whether it became a hit song or not, to go, from every angle of our lives, there's redemption. And to me, that's the good news for somebody listening to this radio show, and they go, well, I'm right in the middle of plates being broken over my head. I'm right in the middle of 3 beatings a week. I'm right in the middle to go, there is an overarching story of redemption being told in and through and over us. And everybody's included. Everybody's included. You know, it does. And like you were saying, it's not how good your song and dance is. That doesn't make you a part of the redeeming reach of God's love. It's just because he loves and he redeems. If you're breathing, you're part of redemption. You know?
Well, you asked earlier about, you said, what would you say to people about forgiveness and stuff? And I think I just kind of ran off and never answered that question, which would be a shame. But you thought, this is my story, it's perfect time here, is that if people take one thing away from this movie, it would be that they understand that their story's not over. As long as there's breath in their lungs, the story's still being written. And if there was one guy said that grace would never be for, it would never work on, would be my dad. And now here we are. And so there are people that give up hope, and they're like, man, you don't know what I'm going through. And I don't know how it's going to end, but the story's still being written. And so, you know, there's, for some reason, the Bible says that Christ redeems all things, not some things, not a few things, not these 10 things, but he redeems all things. I don't know what it looks like, but there's reason to have hope and believe that, you know, the story's not over yet.
So that's it for this edition of Contagious Influencers. I want to thank Bart, Amy, and our very special guest, Dennis Quaid. And folks, you really have to get out and see this movie. I promise you, it is really, really worth it. I've seen it twice, and I'll probably go see it again. So make sure you get out to see I Can Only Imagine. This is David Sams. This has been the Contagious Influencers. And we'll see you next time. Keep the faith, America.